All right, well, I'm going to at least get started a little bit, talk about a few things before we get started on the training, and then we'll go on. So that way, if anybody jumps in a few minutes late, they won't miss too much training. They'll just miss the initial stuff. Okay, so thank you everybody. First of all, hope everybody's healthy, safe, staying healthy, staying safe, practicing social distancing, doing the things we need to do to kind of keep things the way they are and make them get better so that hopefully we can all get back to work, like real work, um, as soon as possible. So the goal here today and moving forward is just to train you on everything we can, get as much information out there as possible. Um, I know each day is going to be something different. It's going to be things that some people will get, some people only get part of, some people have to review. It's some things that you already may know. If you do, I apologize for boring you for a little while. But then again, there may be things that you pick up little things you may not have known about. Um, so a couple things about the Zoom meeting we did go through. So everybody pretty much checked in for the most part Thursday and Friday, which was great. It alleviated a lot of issues that I think we would have seen um, today that we didn't have to deal with. So we can get started at a reasonable time, which is great. A couple of things that we didn't talk about that we kind of changed over the weekend. Um, During the first part of the training, the morning session, we want to try and keep questions to an absolute minimum, if any at all, so that I can keep moving along and going through the training process. So morning session, you guys are just going to kind of listen. If you want to take notes, feel free. If you want to ask questions or you have questions, Dan Thomas and Ed Brennan today will be my co-hosts. They are going to be handling the chat section, and and then for people that have questions, if you want to, you can raise your hand. There's a little raise your hand button that I think a lot of us talked about in the participants section usually, that you can raise your hand. It puts a little blue hand mark up there, and Dan or Ed will then manage, call on you to be able to unmute yourself and ask your question and then go back. One of the things we kind of discussed, I would suggest if you have a question that comes up in the first 2 hour session, I would highly recommend just throw it out there in the chat. Just put the question up there. We may not get to it early on, which is fine, but we'll get to it later, and that way it's a way of remembering your questions. So if you want to utilize the chat feature for that, that would be a good option for you. Um, so we're up to 91 today. All right. So again, I do apologize for a lot of you. A lot of you may already know this. We're going to do production switchers today. We're going to do advanced production switchers tomorrow. We're going to focus on a specific product, the Ross Carbonite, because many of you have that production switcher just in different levels. Um, and we'll go through that. But again, just to remind everybody, stay muted. Questions will be for later on this afternoon. If you do have a question that's pertinent that needs to kind of get answered, again, use the chat feature. Dan or Ed can respond to you. You can either chat to everyone or you can just send it to them individually. I wouldn't recommend sending it directly to me, only because I'm going to be concentrating more on teaching or training as opposed to answering the chat questions. We are recording all these sessions. I'll issue YouTube links as assuming things go as I hope. We'll hopefully have YouTube links up later this afternoon once we get both sessions combined and then uploaded. So it may take a little while, but I hope to get them out sometime in the late afternoon. Okay, so let's see, 10:36, 92 people. We are going to get rolling. First thing I do want to say, I am not a professional trainer. I am who I am. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. So I apologize if I miss anything. Bear with me. I'm a one-man show, switching, doing all sorts of things here. So bear with me as we go through this whole process, as we'll bear with all of you in the Zoom process and training, as it's going to be new to all of us. So let's get started. First and foremost, production switchers. So the image you're looking at right now is a Ross Carbonite production switcher. This is a larger panel than many of you may have. All of these switchers vary in size. Some have 16 inputs, some have 24 inputs, different levels of outputs, different numbers of buttons. As you can see, this panel has 2 layers of buttons. They all differ. So we're going to focus on the basics behind it. We're going to focus on, you know, one layer, because everybody kind of has one layer. We'll touch on all of these different pieces. For those of you that have never seen a production switcher, don't know what it's doing, effectively the live show at every racetrack is all coming through a production switcher. This is used to switch between cameras, switch between graphics, recordings, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole show, this is like the core piece. This is the one piece that's the most important part of any show. This will allow the operators to do all of that neat switching and transitions and dissolves and things like that, creating split screens, everything you need to produce a live show. So the operator would see this panel or some level of it. Like I said, some have 16 buttons, which would cut off about here. Some only have one stripe instead of two. Most of them have these buttons at the top for menus, as well as some of these other things on the side. Now, I will get into and show you all of those different pieces, and we'll kind of zoom in on them and make it so that you can actually see it. So this is the panel that everybody sees. The operator is also seeing a multi-view screen, which looks something like this. So, so the operator sits in front of the panel and then sees a video screen with different images to be able to show them different things. So you can see I have a monitor on my bottom left, the big one, it's marked PRV for preview. I have another one on the bottom right that's marked PGM for program. So program is basically what's getting produced, the live show. Preview is what would be coming up next, what you're going to switch to. So sorry about that. My phone was ringing there from somebody probably trying to get in. So up at the top, you'll see then another 8 windows. Those 8 windows kind of show you the different sources that you have to choose from coming in. As you can see, I have one labeled camera 1, which if you look has Aqueduct video coming into it. Another one is labeled clip player or clip PLYR. The naming conventions are all generic. You can name them anything you want. It just so happens that that's where that other source, the Laurel Park graphic or video feed is coming from. And then you have different things that we'll talk about, different sources that come into play. So that's what the operator would be looking at. And then I have to help us out here, a little bit of a combined image so that we can see the bottom stripe here, and then you can see the top videos. Let's see if I can get my finger on it, even though it's below. So right here, and then here, your preview and program. Preview, program over here. Okay, so from that perspective, this is kind of what the operator sees. So this first section here are your different buses. This is your single stripe. This bottom row is preview. Okay, so when I hit the button, it highlights, right? And now if you were to look at you see every time I hit a button here on this bottom row, it changes to a different source. Okay, so this allows you to change and see what you see in preview. So this is your preview bus. So any button you change or hit there is going to change that preview monitor up above. Okay, this bus here, and we can kind of zoom in real fast. This one right here is program. Now it says on there preset and it says background, but everybody gets used to it saying to being program. So this is your program bus. So when I hit buttons here, you'll see that it changes what's on program. Okay, so very simple. To switch a show, I have X number of sources to choose from, and I can choose between buttons, and it will cut cleanly between those two sources. Okay. Above the program bus is what we call mnemonics. Whoever just joined, if you can just mute yourself for me, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I just have the phone number up. Am I supposed to be able to see you?
No, if you dialed in through a phone, you're not going to be able to. If you have to choose call with internet audio. So.
Okay, I got to figure out how to mute myself though.
Yeah. So Dan or Ed, can you mute that dial in?
I got it.
Okay, thank you. So this layer up here on top is your mnemonics. And what that means is it's basically the name of the source. So I know it may be kind of hard to see, but this source right here says camera 1, just like we had it. Let's show you this. So just like we had it in the window right above preview where New York is coming in, it says cam 1. That aligns with the mnemonic display here saying cam 1, and just like this one says clip player, just like it says on the multi-viewer just to the left of the time, you'll see clip player in that little window. So the mnemonics here show you the name of the sources in the individual boxes. So you can kind of match and see, okay, here's my source, here's camera 1, here's my clip player, and be able to switch back and forth. This top bus here is something called a delegate bus. It does multiple things, and we'll kind of go through in more detail as we go along. But this bus and these buttons up top here are all kind of working together. So for instance, when I hit this button here, which if you can't tell is yellow, the button's yellow, my row lit up in yellow. This button's kind of a green, you'll see it changes the color to green, and so on. So they kind of react to one another. So these buttons are white, it changes my row to white, and it also changes the display, the mnemonic display accordingly. Okay, so these buttons up here and this row down here kind of work together in tandem to be able to change things, adjust things as we go along. So again, we're going to focus on this bottom stripe here, as this is one piece. This one on top here, we're going to ignore for the time being because that is a whole nother strip that you can work with, okay? So just to give you a little bit of reference point. All right, so again, program is this bus down here on the bottom, or in the middle here. Preview is this bus down here on the bottom, and it allows you to change sources. Now, going over to the right side, okay, so after you get through all of these rows here, you've got this right side. Now, many of the switchers do not have this section here. This is what's called effects memory, and we'll dig into that a little bit later. The basic form of these buttons are you can actually remember the entire switcher setup. So you can basically say, set up the entire switcher, every button, everything, and if you hit a number recall on here, it will change the switcher to that time, that frozen time in memory. So it's basically remember the entire thing, every button, anything you want, and then recall it. So that's kind of what this does. We'll dig into that later. The next section over here, these four right here, are called keyers. And what these are is these allow you to put things like graphics or video boxes, like squeeze things, or transitions and things like that. And we'll dig into these obviously a lot deeper. But these allow you to put them on and off of air. So for instance, I can show you, let's do this. So if you see over here, I'm going to take this key 2 and put it on the screen. And if you see, there's a little ISE logo that is coming into the bottom right corner of the screens. Okay, so there's a cut button on the left, which basically cuts the graphic onto the screen. And there's an auto button, which dissolves it onto the screen. It may be hard for you to see through Zoom, but it actually is dissolving. So these buttons allow you to put graphics on and off the screen. Now, a graphic like this little ISE bug is just that little ISE logo, and then everything else is being cut out or removed around it. That's something called an alpha channel or a key channel in the graphics world, and they have to be custom built that way. It's not like you can just take any graphic that somebody hands you and just pop it in there. It's not as simple as that, but as long as the graphics are formatted properly, then with a key channel, it can key over top of the screen. So these buttons are just going to bring on different keys. So I don't have anything in key 1 right now that will cover up anything. I do have something in key 2, however, that will. Okay, so these are 4 different keyers. So you can have and layer 4 different things in this section by doing that. Now, in between those 2 buttons is another mnemonic display. It's another label. And those labels are basically going to show you what is your source. In other words, do I have a graphic channel in there? Do I have a video channel of some kind? Or right now, like I have black in these 2, so there's nothing selected. Now we'll get into selecting what your sources are and what they look like in a little bit, but this is the keyer section. So again, it's going to allow you to key graphics over top of video to be able to bring graphics on and off the screen is really the most useful place for keyers. And then the other big section is going to be DVE boxes. So basically a video that shows a squeezed box on screen. So and a good example of that actually would be if you look at the video in the bottom right with Maryland Jockey Club, the camera image is in a box and then the graphics are surrounding it and or behind it. That image there is what we would call a DVE box. It's a video image that we squeeze to that size. So we're shrinking it from full screen and we're shrinking it down. So we'll dig into that a little bit as well, just to show you to how that all works. So the final section over here is your transition section, okay? So this section can be a little bit complicated, and we're going to dig in a lot into this section as the next 2 days roll. But this section is basically how you transition things. So there's a lot of different buttons here. This section here is your background and your 4 keys, and we'll dig into this a little bit later too, because this is a pretty complicated section. This next set is the type of transition you want to use. So there are different transitions. There's a dissolve, there's a wipe, there's a DVE move, there's a media transition, and we'll kind of go through each one of them. But that says how do you want or what do you want to use to transition. And then at the bottom here, there's roll clip, which we'll ignore for now. And then there's cut and auto trans. Just like your keys had cut and auto, your main has cut and auto too. And then there's a T-bar. So digging into this a little bit more, you have these buttons here, right? So if I take this T-bar and slide it down, you'll see up above my preview window and my program window are going to switch. They're going to flip-flop. What that means is when I use this T-bar, it transitions from one to the other. It takes whatever's on preview and puts it on program. So if I'm switching cameras, I can very simply use a T-bar and at my speed, and you can see I can do it as slow or as fast as I want, and it will slowly mix and come into play. Okay, so the T-bar allows you your own control. I can use an auto transition button, right, which we talked about a little bit. So this auto transition does it automatically. So I hit it once, it takes a predetermined amount of time to change what's on preview to program. And every time I hit it, it just goes back and forth. The next button, cut, which is right here, this one allows you to just cut between sources. So no dissolve, no slow dissolve, just back and forth, back and forth. Whatever's on preview will go to program. Now we talked about dissolve, wipe, DVE. So for instance, a dissolve is exactly that. So when I hit auto transition, it dissolves between those 2. Or if I use a T-bar and I go up and down, it will dissolve between those 2. If I change it to wipe, okay, so I change this button up here to wipe right here. When I do this, now it's going to wipe. See how it's wiping that video across? It's not dissolving anymore. It's using a vertical wipe that will wipe between the 2. And as soon as it gets to the end, you'll see that video change. So the Laurel Park, the Maryland Jockey Club race on the left, the Aqueduct race on the right. As I transition this, it'll start to take the Aqueduct away, put up the Laurel Park. As soon as I get to the end, it switches it. So now I've completed my transition, and I have what was on program before is now moved over to preview. Okay, so that is a wipe transition. Okay, and we'll go through a little bit as to how to change what that looks like as well. The DVE is a different type of transition. It's more of a push transition. So instead of a wipe, see how the whole image is moving? So you can see it's a little bit different. And maybe I'll try a different, change the DVE real quick so we can see something different. So you see how it takes the video box, squeezes it down, and flies it out. Okay, so I'm doing this slowly with my T-bar, but I can actually hit the auto transition button and it happens real fast. So every time I hit this transition button, it's going to transition using that DVE. So there are different transitions, and we'll look at that section of the switcher to see how to change those. Now, media transition. We're going to dig into media transition a little bit later, possibly not even until tomorrow. But a media transition is basically a custom designed graphic transition. So I'm sure many of you have seen at the racetracks or on NBC or anybody else when they transition from one camera to another, or from a video or into a video replay or something of that nature, you'll see this animated graphical transition that has like a logo, like an NBC logo or a racetrack's logo, and it will actually transition using that graphic. So we'll dig into that a little bit later, but that's what that media button would do down here. The section, let's look at wipe and DVE for a second. So the wipe, so when you hit on this wipe button, it's actually going to change a section of the production switcher. So up top, at the very top of the production switcher, are these buttons or these LED displays, and these will change depending upon what you do in other sections of the switcher. So if I hit the DVE button, they just changed and gave me choices for different DVE moves. If I hit the wipe button, they're going to give me kind of their different choices. So like I can go to a diamond wipe here, which shows the diamond. If I then take that off and I use my T-bar here, you can see now my wipe is a diamond. So those buttons up at the top will actually change based upon what you select down here and allow you to then change it to utilize different transitions. Okay, so we're going to finish off this transition. So now, same thing applies with DVE. It allows you to change those different. My keyboard a little closer here. It allows you to change to those different types of DVE moves. Now, the hardest part of this, dissolve, by the way, does give you, if you change dissolve, it gives you the option to slow down your dissolve. So I could choose a 60 frame dissolve or a 45 frame or something like that, which would allow me to then, when I hit auto transition, it will take it much slower as opposed to a 10 frame dissolve, which is much faster. So it allows you to basically change the time it takes for that transition to happen. So that's up in this top area here. These change. This whole section will actually change based upon what is selected down in this area, as well as globally across the whole switcher. So this section here, just above the dissolve, wipe, and DVE section, zoom back in on that one. So this section here is a little bit more complicated. This is where you choose what do you want to transition. So think of it this way. You have what do you want to transition, how do you want the transition to look, and then make the transition. Okay, so it's kind of in 3 different segments. So again, it's what do you want to transition up here, how do you want to transition it, and then go ahead and transition it. So take it to program. So this top section here with background key 1, key 2, key 3, and key 4 is basically a way to say, what do I want to transition? So if I have my background selected, it's going to always transition between from here to here, and it will transition just the background. So that's these two layers here. So whatever I have on this preview bus is going to go to the program bus when I transition. So for instance, if I hit auto transition, you're going to see them transition, and you're also going to see down here these lights flipped. They moved, right? Because what I had on preview has now moved to program. Okay, so all of this, the switcher's kind of happening all at the same time. When you hit buttons, you'll see different lights light up. So these are going to switch. You see it finish the transition, and they flip-flopped. Okay, so the background bus is basically changing these two. It's taking whatever's down here up to here. Okay, but if I said key 2 and only select key 2, now all of a sudden, if you look at the two windows up top here, I've got my preview on the left, I've got my program on the right, and one of the most important things, and we're going to talk about this a lot, we're going to come back to this, I promise, because this is where it gets complicated, but when you hit auto transition down here, or cut, or use your T-bar, that is basically saying whatever you see in your preview window right here is going to go onto your program window. So whatever you see on preview, when you hit the transition button, that's what your program's going to look like. Okay, so that's like one of the most important concepts we'll talk about, and one of the most important things you'll have to remember. Okay, so because I have key 2 selected here, that means whatever I have in this key here, in key 2, is showing up in my preview box. So if you look, you'll see the ISC logo is showing up there. Okay, I have New York, the New York image in the background, and I have the ISC logo on the left, and on the right, I just have New York. So that means when I hit the auto transition button, the only thing that's going to come on the screen or change on the screen is that ISC logo, because New York is still on my left in preview and is in right in program. So again, preview is going to show you exactly what program's going to look like when I hit the button. So if I hit auto transition, you'll see my ISC logo has now gone on air. It's gone to program. Okay, and I promise you we're going to come back to this about 10 more times because this is really confusing. Okay, but my ISC logo is the only thing that's transitioning. So in key 2, because that's where my ISC logo is, it's in key 2, it transitions back and forth every time I hit it. So if I just cut, you'll just see the ISC logo is the only thing that's moving from preview to program. So I'm basically saying just use key 2 here. Now I can choose any key individually. I can choose background. I can choose multiple things, and we'll dive into this a lot deeper, like I said. But this is going to allow you to decide what to transition. So if I have my background selected, it's just going to transition between these two buses, preview and program. If I have background and key 2 both lit up, it's going to do this, and it's going to do my key at the same time, which now if you look, you'll see whatever's on preview is going to go to program. You'll see when I transition, it takes both of them at the same time. So again, this section over here is going to be, what do you want to take from preview to program? How do you want to take it? And then take it. So, and this is kind of the most important section of the entire switcher in terms of understanding what's going on because of the complexity behind it, and how important it is to be able to select what you transition, how important it is to be able to select how you transition it, and then how to get it onto the air. So we'll come back to all that. Just to go over a couple other sections of the switcher, this top section here, again, we kind of talked about these buttons. These are mnemonic displays, little LED buttons, and they change depending upon what's selected on the production switcher. So you can see I can change these to different things. If I hit menu, it brings up menu buttons. If I hit certain buttons like we talked about, wipe or DVE or things like that, that section changes based upon what's selected. So this is kind of a section that will change depending upon what you select. This section over here, most of these switchers are a little bit smaller than this one. This, like I said, this one has a pretty big panel. So this section up here is just going to give you the ability to select different things when you're doing memory panel recalls or storing panels that remember the entire switcher. So again, we talked very briefly, you can actually store the entire production switcher panel as it is, as it looks, and you can store and recall those things up here as well as in that little memory panel that I had showed you earlier on today, which was right here. So this is some switchers, a lot of switchers don't have this section here. So we'll go through it here, and we'll also go through it up top here as well so that you can get a feel for that. So that's that section there. And then last section is we have this area here, which basically is menu buttons and then this display and these three knobs. So this display will again change depending upon what you have selected. So if I were to select different things, you'll see different options come up on the screen to show you different things in the displays. And it will also allow you to then push, select, change. So if I wanted to change something, I can rotate this dial and it changes whatever is above it. So these buttons correspond to what's directly above it. So time, I can change the time here, which is a number of frames we're looking at here. I selected the dissolve feature, which we'll look at a little bit more closer later, but because this is allowing me to select how fast I want to dissolve things, and then here are a couple other settings. These buttons also do two things. Not only do they change things this way, they also push. So if you push it, it selects something. So this is not, the place I am right now doesn't allow you to select anything. It only allows you to spin as a dial. But if it did select or give you the option, you could push and it would also make a selection. So this section up here is basically menus. Every button is labeled. So this next button over here says next. I think it may be kind of hard for you to see because of the light, but it's a next button that allows you to go to different pages within there, within this screen or this setup. And then there's also a shift button, which allows you to, if you hold it, you see I get items here to go back home, or I can go back a menu as well. So this will be back a menu. This button here says lock and home. So if I was to go to a different page, I could hit shift and say home, and it would take me back to the beginning. So for instance, if you had a section that had 10 pages, instead of going through and saying, okay, let's hit back one, back another, you can just hold shift and hit home. It takes you back home. So that's kind of the menu section over here. Last but not least, the only thing we haven't really gone over yet is there's two other things. There's a USB port, which is totally inactive, so you can ignore that it even exists. So forget I even said anything about it. And then you have a joystick. The joystick you'll use sparingly. We will go through it a tiny bit, but it's very rare that I would recommend using the joystick, because there are other ways to adjust things and move things around that gives you much more granular control over things. So I would recommend using the buttons and not necessarily the joystick all the time. So that's the production switcher as a whole. We talked about the stripes here. I've got a few more things to talk about up here, but we have this stripe, which is a single stripe, and we'll call it an ME, a mix effects. So that allows you to create mixes and wipes and transitions and do all of that up here. This switcher that we're looking at, this panel, has a second stripe. So it's basically, think of it as a whole nother production switcher, a whole nother set that you can do whatever it is that you want with. And this whole setup becomes an input into this. So we would call this ME1 for Mix Effects 1, and then we would call this program. And as a source, as an option, I have ME1, and I think you may be able to see it if I get in here. Let's see, it's right here. So I'm not sure if you can see that. Let's see if I do this. So it says in there ME1. So that is this entire bus. The output, think of this entire bus as it sits, the whole thing, the video program of this entire bus comes back in as one single button right here. Purposes for that would be something that feeds into a DVE box or a split screen, or things that you want to build that you can build in here and not have to worry about program at the time. You can just build it up here and then bring it in as one single button down below. So this becomes an input, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as we dig in deeper. The last thing I want to talk about is just as an overview. So this section up here, we talked briefly that this kind of controls this bus here. So over on the left, you've got key options. So basically, when you select a key, so remember we talked about key 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here that allow you to put up graphics. We have the ability to select key 1, 2, 3, and 4 right here on the panel. So key 1 is selected. And what this does is that changes this bus to yellow and highlights over here a button as well. So what that means is key 1 has this source. Whatever source I select on this bus is what's going to be in my key. So if I have a graphic channel, like a Viz or an Expression or a Deco or something of that nature, which I'm pretty sure all of you have, that will allow you to select that graphic channel. So for instance, here it says Viz. I could select Viz in there, and that would give me my key of my graphics. So I could key my Viz, my graphic channel, over top of video by doing that, and it would be in key 1. So key 1 select lets me choose what I want in my key. So if I choose, let's say M2 in my key, you'll see M2 is now the source inside my keyer there. Okay, so key 1 select allows me to select which source I want inside my key channel over here. Okay, it doesn't put it on air, it just allows me to select the source. Now, key 1 select also gives me the option of selecting what type of key it is. So let's talk about different types of key. So there's a button here called self key, and I know these are kind of hard to read, so I do apologize. On the left is a self key. Basically, a self key is going to be a graphic that has, let's say, a lot of black in it. So the background is all black, and then the graphic itself is full of colors. A self key will allow it to try and take out any of this black, this 100% black, and try and like pull it out. It'll try and basically make it invisible, so that I could take anything that's colored and put it over top of live video. So that's kind of what a self key would do. Auto select is used when you have a video signal coming in, like a graphic channel, that has what we would call an alpha channel or a key signal along with it. And what that means is that you can have a graphic that has a white and black channel to it. So it's like the graphic, and then an additional channel that is just either white or black, and tells the production switcher what to key out. So what to take out of the image and what to allow in. As an example, if we were to look at Let me get all these off the air for you. So if we were to look at M2 up top, in the top right corner, you'll see M2 has got that little ISC bug. And you can see that bug is in the top right has, actually I can put it on preview for you. So if you look on preview, you see the ISC bug in the bottom right corner and you see white everywhere else, okay? So if I go to show the alpha, so you'll see that the bug, where the bug is now full white and everything else is black. So in the graphics world, what that means is anything that's white, the production switcher knows how to knows to show it. So white is something that it shows in full. Black is something that it gets rid of. It cuts out everything that's black. And anything in between, shades of gray would be semi-transparent. So it's a little deceiving because you see a little bit of a shade of gray, and that's only because of the label at the bottom of my window. But basically, it would show white. Anything that's white, it shows. Anything that's black, it doesn't show. And anything in between is some level of transparency. So you'll see my ISC logo in the bottom right corner, and it's all white in the background behind it. But when I put that on air, it doesn't show it. So you can see with it being on air, and I'm going to change to this because it's just a little bit easier to see it. You can see my logo is up on the screen, but all that white is being cut out, right? It's being removed. So my key, my auto select, is basically saying use the alpha channel, use that key channel that we're looking at here. So if I go to show alpha, you'll see use that white and black to determine what gets placed or what is seen on the video and what is cut out. So that's kind of what auto select is doing. Auto select is allowing you to select the, it's automatically figuring out what the key channel is or what key channel to use to figure out what to remove and what to show on screen. So the next button, wrong button there, sorry about that. So the next button over here is CHR key. It actually stands for chroma key. Basically, a chroma key would allow you to set up a chroma key with a green screen, and we'll dig into that a little bit deeper tomorrow because that gets a little more complicated. But it would effectively allow you to key out a color. So for instance, if we had a graphic that was green and we use that, we could take, I can actually pull one up for you real fast. So we could take out and take out that green. So if I changed key 1 to a chroma key and I put in the right source, then I can actually use key 1 to key that over by just selecting, I apologize, but I think my switcher is off on the configuration. Yeah, so we're going to show you chroma key tomorrow. I apologize for that. So we'll show chroma key tomorrow after I can get that configuration set up. Key 1 we're going to use now. So instead of chroma key, we'll go move on to the next feature. So again, a chroma key will just take out a green screen, very similar to what you see on the weather on TV. So they're just basically taking a person, putting them over top of a green screen, and that way all the green gets removed. All you see is the person, and then they can walk in front of any live video or anything else. The fourth option is DVE. What a DVE key is a DVE key will let you squeeze back and resize video. For instance, if I put my key on, I can take my key and I can, let's get a different source in there. And I can squeeze that back. So you see how I'm actually using the joystick to maneuver this around. You can use whatever you want, and we'll go through that. You could use a joystick. You could use the positional knobs up top here just to kind of show you what I am looking at here. You can use these knobs that will allow you to position it. You can use the joystick that will allow you to position it. but this is a DVE. So we call it a squeeze back DVE, a video box, any number of different things. So this allows me to key that DVE box over top of another video signal. Okay, so I can change my key to something different, and this is just changing my source. And I can squeeze that in, right? So now it looks like I have, you know, Maryland Jockey Club graphics, but I have a DVE box that is carrying New York's video on it, right? So this allows you to overlay different things and specifically different videos or graphics or things like that. So DVE is something we'll dig into as well. That's going to be used a lot of racetracks around the country. I'll use DVE boxes to insert video, just as you can see they do at Laurel as well. So I can remove my DVE. There's a key, right? So we selected key 1, we made it a DVE, and now I can take it on and off the air by just hitting the cut button, and it will take it on and off screen. I can move it, I can shrink it, I can do whatever we want with it. And again, still, as I key, it will take it on and off screen. So that is a DVE. So these are the different types. So these 4 buttons here are the different types of keys that you can use in any one of those keyers. Okay. These last few 2 buttons over here, show alpha, we kind of talked about it briefly, but show alpha is going to allow you to show a graphic. You can actually show in preview, you can see what the alpha is going to be for your key. So I'm going to change this back to an auto select. And if I go to show alpha, it's going to show the alpha of the source going in. So key 1 right now, my source is camera 1, which I don't want. So I'm going to change my source in key 1 to be my graphic. Okay, and then I'm going to show the alpha of that graphic, of this key, and it's going to show my little ISC bug. If I was in a DVE mode and I show the alpha, it's going to show you the alpha of the DVE box, so the location of the DVE box as it sits right now. So you can see that white would be the DVE box. So if I were to key this on, you'll see my DVE box come on, and the show alpha button would just show me where that box exactly is. And then I have key preview, which I don't really use too much. Key preview will allow you to, I don't even think it's active, to be honest with you. So we're going to ignore key preview. So the next 4 buttons over here are the key 1, key 2, key 3, and key 4 select buttons. So these buttons here are going to allow you to select key 1 and then decide, okay, key 1, I want it to be auto select as a graphic or a DVE, and then what do I want in it? So key 1 is going to be a DVE, and we're going to put camera 1 in it. So when I key that onto air, I have my DVE in this image, and you'll see it's squeezed back in a box. That's the DVE, right? And then we can maneuver that around wherever we want for that. So my key 1 select, if I change my source, you'll see it's also changing the source in the box. Okay, so I can put anything in that box or in that key that we want because I have key 1 selected, and this allows me, this bus again changes all the time and allows me to select a source. Okay, so I can do this for key 1. I can also do this for key 2, key 3, and key 4. They are all individual keyers. They work independently of one another, and each one has their own selection. And again, we kind of talked, this key 1 is yellow, so it changes these buttons to yellow. Key 2 is green, so hopefully you can see that. It changes these to be green. Key 3 is blue, and key 4 is purple. So it kind of helps you figure out what colors you know, what this bus is doing at the time by glancing at the colors on all of these buttons. So the next section over here is aux. So if we look a little bit closer, we've got these buttons right here. They are called auxes. Now, what an aux is a separate output out of the production switcher. So for instance, we might use aux to be able to send a feed to TVG, or send it to a special channel in the building somewhere, or use it for a studio monitor or something, where we want to send an individual feed out of the production switcher that is different from program. So we would select aux1, and then I can turn to that output. I can change the feed going to that output by just selecting any of these buttons, and they all correspond to the names you see below the layer. So if I wanted to send camera 1 to aux1, I would just select this first button. If I wanted to send the clip layer, I would select the second button. So there are multiple auxes that you can utilize, and they do lots of different things, but generally speaking, an aux is just a send a feed. You can't transition or wipe or dissolve between. Whenever you change it, it just cuts right to that feed or that source. Okay, so think of it as not necessarily a full production piece, but think of it as extra sources. I need to send something somewhere, and I want it to be clean, and I want to have control of it from the production switcher. So this panel gives you up to 8 auxes to be used quickly. All of them are showing up white, so you have to be careful. This layer will always be white no matter which button you choose there. It just highlights in green which ones you have selected. So you can see that light is highlighting that button there. So, and as you can see, it will change. If you watch this bus here, this aux bus, as I change feeds, you'll see that button change to a different source. Okay, so so if I were to say now when I change aux1, you'll see the source. Sorry, let me get my arm out of there for you. As I change aux1, aux2, aux3, aux4, you can see the sources are all changing on these. So they can be completely different. They all do different things and are designed to work as a separate feed out of the production switcher. So that is the aux section. So, and I'm not sure if you can see above this layer, it says key aux custom control. So we have keys, changes this bus to work the keys. Aux, it changes this bus to work the aux. And then the last one is custom controls. So these 4 over here on the left, well, they're on the right of that side, but on the left side of your screen, you'll see bank 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, what bank 1, 2, 3, and 4 are called custom controls. A custom control is basically a single button push that will record. You can record any commands or anything you want in the from the production switcher into a single button. So for instance, if I wanted to have a single button that changed my source on program and turned a key on, took it from preview to program, changed an aux to a different video signal, or any number of other things, I can actually store and save a custom control that allows me to just hit one button in the custom control area, this whole bus over here. So let me just get rid of that. So if I hit bank 1, I have all my custom controls across the top. And I can program that each one of these buttons to do a different thing or a different number of things. So they're pretty powerful tools to make your show very easy to produce. Technically speaking, you could use a custom control and literally build an entire show and produce and switch an entire show by just hitting a single button. And the way you would do that is every button you can insert in between different commands. And we're going to go through custom controls very in depth tomorrow because they're very powerful and useful. But you can actually create a button that would do a command, take a command, and then insert a hold or a pause. So I could say, switch this button to camera 7 right here, pause for 2 seconds, and then switch to that. And I could do that all with one button push. I could also say, with one button push up here, switch this bus to source 2 and hold, and this button would actually blink, waiting for me to actually hit it again. And then the next time I hit it, it would proceed to do the next command in its list. So you can actually insert these holds and sit there and just hit a button. It'll do what it needs to do. When you're ready to switch again, you hit the button again, and while it's blinking, you would hit it one more time. It would do the command. It would, if there's another hold, it would hold. If there's a pause, it would pause. Or if there was just another command in line to go, it would then go through the rest of the commands. So a custom control allows you to record all your button pushes or get into detail in the software and allow you to actually change and create commands and sequences that one single button push would allow you to do. So when you hit bank 1, it changes this bus to be your custom control bus. Now, a couple of things. You have 4 banks. So that means this panel has 24 buttons, so you can have 24 commands or custom controls in bank 1. And it also means that if you have bank 2, 3, and 4, you can have 24 in each of those 4 banks. So that's going to give you up to 96 custom controls at your fingertips. Okay? For those of you that do have a 2ME switcher, 2 stripes, one at the top and one at the bottom, let me just get you that. So for those of you that have a stripe here and a stripe up here, you have bank buttons up here as well. The one thing I will note, many of you already know this, is that these are not independent of one another. So what that means, this bus is its own bus and this is its own. They do completely independent things. The buttons up here are controlling keys for this bus. The buttons down here are controlling keys for this bus. They are completely separate. However, the one thing that's not separate is the banks. So you have 4 total banks, and I don't care if you call bank 1 here or here, you have the same options. They're not, doesn't give you 96 here and a different 96 up here. They are identical. Okay, so if I call bank 1 here and bank 1 here, these 2 buses right here these buttons will do the exact same thing if I hit them. Okay, no difference. So that's somewhat important to know. I know that in going through training with a lot of people, that is always a question that comes up. So again, the banks are for the entire switcher. They are not bus or stripe dependent for those of you that do have 2 MEs. So that is your custom controls. And we will definitely go through the custom controls and the banks much more significantly as we move along. The one thing I also do want to show you, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, when I select aux here, my mnemonics, the labels, right? So those labels are pretty large, and you might be able to see them: camera 1, camera 2, viz, PVP, ADVS, M1, M2. They're different mnemonics, right? Well, when I hit bank, it's going to take my mnemonics and change them. And you can see they're split. So what it is the source for the button down here. So for instance, this button here, which was Viz. So if we go and we look here, this says Viz here. So this button is my Viz graphics. But if I go to bank, this button here now, it says Viz underneath. I know you probably can't see it, and I do apologize. It does say Viz underneath, so the underneath corresponds to these 2 buses, and the above, it says, in this instance, MEM81, or if you can see, let's see if we can see this one better. If you can see that one better, it says photo up above. So that means there's a custom control for this bus that's labeled photo, and that's going to do something specific. I can tell you in this instance for photo, it's built so that it automatically freezes the photo and puts it into a media store channel, something that can allow you to put the photo, take the photo, freeze it, and if photo has another photo finish to show a second one, they can actually change their feed to be that second one, and you have the first one frozen. So the top section of the mnemonics display shows you the name of the custom control that you're calling. So perfect example would be is we name a lot of custom controls to do a lot of different things. One of them is usually a help button. So I usually take and create a custom control, store it in bank 4, and this last button here, in 95% of our installations, that custom control would then say, it doesn't say it here, of course, so terrible use case, I guess, but it says BG right here for background. It normally would say help. I usually create a help button. If you don't have a help button, let me know, and I'll work with you on it. You should have one. So we create a simple help button. So this button right here, this last custom control in bank 4, basically resets your switcher. We basically build one so that it remembers everything in the switcher from A to Z, so that if you lose power or something happens and somebody gets in here and makes a switch that messed you up and you don't know what happened or where it was, that help button, by just hitting that one button, will recall everything back to normal and get you to a standard point where you're ready to go back to your show. So it's really important to have one. If you don't have one, please let me know. I'm happy to help walk you through creating one. It's really very very simple, and we'll probably walk through that tomorrow as well in memories. So and that's because that's all really a help button is. A help is just a memory recall. It's basically taking a snapshot of the entire switcher, storing it into a memory, and then allowing it to be recalled very simply through a named custom control. So a named button that says help, that means something, as opposed to maybe a number like 99 that you might have to recall something different. So that's basically this stripe here. We've kind of gone through all of the little details of the stripe. This one up here, again, being a 2ME switcher, is just a duplicate of this. All the buttons work identically, do the same thing. The only difference is they do it in a separate bus. So for instance, I'm going to try and show you this real fast, just so you get an idea of another bus. So I'm going to preview in the preview window, right? So in preview, I'm going to put ME1, which is the second bus up top here. So if you were to look at that, you'll see in preview is ME1. So what that means is if I come up here, and as I'm hitting, if I keep hitting cut, I'm changing ME1, right? So I'm only changing what's in ME1. I'm not actually affecting program at all because I'm not changing down here. I'm just changing this one source. So think of it almost as this becomes a whole nother source, like a whole nother camera, let's call it, coming back into the production switcher as an input here. So as I switch on ME1, I can wipe on ME1 just like we would normally, right? So as you can see, I'm just wiping here back and forth. Okay, so I can wipe, I can DVE on ME1, all the same features that we have. You can see I'm just using my T-bar, or you can use the auto transition button. So all those same features that we have on our program bus down below, we have on our ME1 bus as well. So we can layer things a lot more. So split screens and keyers and things can be used in your ME1 bus and then brought down and combined with more keyers on your program bus. So it's a very useful tool. It just adds some complexity and some cost, and every system is built dependent upon needs and finances and everything else that we won't dig into obviously today. But that's, so we just, we configure each production system to their needs. Some have the 2ME, some have a single ME. So this is the second ME. Here are all these keyers over here. So it's laid out just slightly different, just for room, to make room. They just move the T-bar and they move the keyer sources to the right as opposed to here. So there's just a little bit of a flip-flop so that you're not fumbling over with a T-bar or things like that. So they tried to make the interface user-friendly, the panel, and that was kind of one of the things they had to do. A couple of things to take note of, some of the things that a lot of people get confused about, especially when they first see the production switcher and they were coming from another production switcher, is preview is down on the bottom, program is in the middle. And don't forget that this is not your program bus, okay? This is, again, for keys, for auxes, and custom controls. It is not going to change program. The mnemonics are kind of in a weird place, and they did it for a reason, but you would almost think the mnemonics should be between these two buses, and that's where people get very much confused. The reason they put it between these two is because of the custom controls and being able to name them so that you can see what you're calling. So they assume you'll work in rows, and when you see a source, anything below the source is the button to hit. Anything above it on that is for the top side of the mnemonic. So don't get confused with that. Know that this is program, this middle bus, the bottom bus is preview. As we kind of showed you here, preview and program. Okay, so that's definitely a place for some confusion. The other place for confusion, and we'll dig in. Sorry, that's the wrong button. Is down here. So I want to kind of dig in a little bit more down here because I think that's where some of the biggest confusion is going to be, and then we'll kind of really jump into some more detailed stuff after we finish that. So this section here again is going to be your preview bus in terms of what do you want to transition on screen, right? So again, this is what do you want to transition, this is how, and this is go ahead and transition it on screen. So if we select background again, okay, here's background, this first button, it's going to transition these two, okay, flip-flop these two. So as I hit cut, you'll see these two are flipping, okay? So it transitions between program and preview. All right, so if I select key 1, now all I'm transitioning is my key. It's right here, same thing. If I hit that button, it's putting it on screen and off screen, okay? If I hit it here, it's just saying all I'm going to transition is that key. That DVE box up here is going to go over to here. So as I hit cut, you'll see the DVE box move. Now you'll notice my background, my Laurel Park signal, is not changing. It's not going across because all I have selected here is key 1. So I'm saying only transition key 1 from preview to program. Okay. If I select background end key 1, and let me just take that off there so not to confuse everyone. So if I choose background end key 1, okay, now I see on the left, I see a background of New York video. I see a box with New York video, which is my key. And I see Laurel over here, which means that when I hit cut or auto trans or T-bar, it's going to take my background, the New York video, and it's going to take my key 1, which is my video box, and it's going to take them both onto the screen at the same time. Okay, so a lot of people will call that maybe a key tie. So it's tying your key to your background and bringing them both on at the same time. Now, if I wanted to bring on my background and I wanted to bring on just that ISC graphic, I can select background and key 2 at the same time. So 2 buttons, push them at the same time. Now on the left, you'll see my background is going to change to New York, and my ISC logo is going to come on the screen when I hit cut. So if I hit cut, it changes both my background and that graphic, that key, and they come on and off screen together. If I just wanted to change my background, I would select background. If I just wanted to change my graphic, that key 2, right? I can select key 2 over here and then take just the graphic. And you'll notice, because I don't have background selected, I only have key 2. My preview is only showing me the ISC logo, because that's the only thing when I hit transition that's going to move over to program. So again, preview is whatever you see on preview is when you hit auto transition or cut, that's what you're going to see on program. No matter what you do, if you don't see it here, when you hit auto trans or cut, it's not going to be on program the way you want it. Okay, so preview allows you to build what your next move is going to look like and be, so that way when you hit cut, it's going to put that on air and it's going to look as you want it to look. So there are no restrictions to the number of keys or buttons that can be selected here. So I can have all of them highlighted. You can see all 5 of these buttons are highlighted. Now, that means that I can bring on a background, my ISC logo, and the video box. And that will all come on at the same time when I cut. So there's no limit. I can have just 3. So I can have background key 1 and key 2. I can have just background and key 2. I can do even just key 1 and key 2. So I can just bring these 2 over, not change my background, keep the Laurel on screen, but bring the DVE box and the ISC logo over on screen when I hit cut. Okay, so a very important concept, very important thing to understand. All right, so I can bring them on together. I can bring them on separately. I can gang these buttons however you want to use them, but these buttons are what you're going to bring over, how you're going to do it. And if I choose, let's say, my video box and my ISC logo, and I have it set for dissolve right now, when I hit auto transit, dissolves on. If I have it set for wipe, it will wipe on. So you can see it's not changing my background, but it's wiping on those two keys. So I can sit there and wipe that through. Comes off the screen, goes back over to preview, comes back up, and goes back over to program. Okay, same thing goes for DVE, right? Which is, so DVE won't allow you can't use a DVE push to bring on a graphic or things like that. So DVE is mainly just for background. So now I have my keys on screen, right? But I can choose background and only change the background behind it. So if you look over here, my keys are on both screens. So I have my DVE, right, which is right here. That's a little squeeze back. And I also have my logo, right? So when I have background selected and I have keys on my screen on air program, when I have background selected, all that's going to change is my background. So you can see the DVE box and the graphic show up on preview to show you exactly what program's going to look like when you hit that button. So if I change, I can change my background behind it as well. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility as to what you choose or what you change going on behind the program with these 5 buttons here. It allows you to tie things together, bring them in individually, or just separate out individual elements as well. So the one thing to remember is that when you're bringing on your background or your keys all together, you're going to remember that preview is showing you what it's going to look like when it gets to program. So if I select key 1 here, I'm going to show you, let's take them both off. I'm going to show you something real fast. So if I select key 2 right here, so I'm just going to bring my graphic on, just that little ISC bug. It's going to come over to program because I have key 2 selected and I hit auto transition. It'll bring it on air. Now, you can do it this way, okay? However, you can also very simply do it over here because your keys also allow simple on and off screen on their own with just these buttons here, okay? So you may ask, well, if I can just hit that button and not have to worry about changing any of this, why would I bother over here? Well, there's twofold. One is this allows you to see it on preview so you can see what my key is going to look like, what the graphic would look like, or the DVE box, or the chroma key, or whatever it may be. So that's first. It allows you to look at it on preview before it goes to air. And the other reason is you might actually want to tie it together so that when you bring the logo on, it's also going to come on with another video signal so that they're both tied together. Both ways are useful for you. You can bring them on tying them. You can bring them on individually over here, or you can use these buttons here, either cut or auto, as a way of bringing on that key individually. So I don't have anything there, but I do have one on key 2. So this will cut it on screen. This will dissolve it on screen, and it works pretty easily that way. So both ways function, but you may find this to be an easier way to key certain graphics and things on, and especially once you get more comfortable. A lot of people use these as opposed to trying to use that over here, especially when you're going to have a monitor up above that might show you your graphics. So like, I know it's hard to see. I can show you. So when you're looking at your multi-viewer, you can see that little ISC bug in the right just above program. So you're going to have monitors that show you your graphics and things like that. So it won't be as, you're not working as blind, I guess, as one would think. So you don't have to necessarily take it onto preview once you feel comfortable. So that's this bus. We've talked about T-bar. We may be going over 100 participants here. I do hear a few people dropping in and out, and we are up to 99, so that's good. Glad everybody's here today. Hope everybody's still awake. I'm sorry to have bored you a little bit. I'll try and make it a little more interesting as we go through the last 40 minutes or so. So again, your keys, the transition area, your main bus that does pretty much all of your switching, and then the memory section. I want to touch on a software application real fast that many of you may not have ever seen or used yet, but there is a software application for the production switcher as well. So I'm going to kind of bring up that interface for you so you can see what that looks like in a half a second here. Okay. So so this is kind of an interface that allows you to see and do different things within the production switcher. This is a program called Dashboard. Dashboard will allow you to see your different MEs and your keys and do different things. I'm not going to go through this in depth right now. In fact, I may not at any point get in depth to this, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea that it does exist and it is there. And this allows you to really dig in and change parameters of keys, or you can go in here and change bus sources. I can actually switch the entire production switcher from this panel by just coming in. There's actually a panel that I can choose. It's going to look very similar to your production switcher. And I didn't have it up, but I'm going to call it up real fast for you. So the panel will look very similar to what a production switcher is. It will have all the similar buttons. It'll just be a little bit smaller and even have a T-bar on it, just like your panel does. And I promise you it's going to come up here any second. So while we're waiting for that to pop up, oh, there we go. Here it comes. So the panel is going to have all these buttons down at the bottom that will show you, and even have the mnemonics down there that will allow you to switch different sources and different things. And it's going to actually be controlling the production switcher. So technically, this right now is actually changing my program on the production switcher as I push buttons. So, and you have a little T-bar over here on the right that you can actually transition things. So it's actually like its own little production switcher that you can control via a computer. So we'll dig into this a little bit deeper, maybe tomorrow, depending on time. but you can really get in and do some pretty cool stuff inside of Dashboard that will allow you to help you build custom controls or different things. There's also a feature called Media Manager. This can be accessed from pretty much any web browser on any computer that's on the network of the production switcher. And Media Manager allows you to put things into media stores. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this is because there are 4 media store channels in a production switcher. Okay, so let's let's do this. Let's look at it this way. So in the top right corner, you will see, or the second row, you'll see M1 and M2. M1 has a graphic with a woman and a green screen behind her, and then M2 has that white background with the ISC bug on it. So M1 and M2 are considered media store channels. What they are graphical channels that you can use to add graphics to your keys, or for full screen graphics or media transitions. It does some animation, so that's where many of those media transitions that we'll get into tomorrow come from. They come out of a media store channel. Now, depending on your switcher, you will have 4 media store channels. In the earlier versions, they all have 4 media stores, but 2 of them are kind of ganged together. So M1 with M1, 2, 3, and 4, M1 and M3 work in tandem together, and M2 and M4 work in tandem together. And the way that they work is basically, we touched a little bit on graphics with alpha channels. So if I have this graphic in M2, and in fact, I can show you what this might actually, it's probably not going to show the key. So if in M2 I have a graphic, if you have an older production switcher, M4 is going to show the key channel, that actual show alpha that we talked about, this black with in preview right now, you'll see that black with that white square. So M4, because it's tied to M2, M4 would have that black and white image, and M2 would have the graphic, and the production switcher is smart enough to know, okay, whatever I have in M2, use M4 as the key channel to tell me what's black and white, what's keying over top of live video, and what's not. So again, the same thing, M1 would use channel M3 to allow you to have those key channels. In the very newest production switchers, and we only have a couple of them out there in the field already just yet, that they just came out sort of, I guess, fall of 19. They have the ability to have 4 media store channels, and each M1, 2, 3, and 4 has its own dedicated key channel, this own black and white image assigned to it internally in the production switcher. So you would actually have 4 channels as opposed to 2 channels on the newer. So the nice thing about these media store channels is they can be used to frame grab, photo finish. They can be used to store little graphics that you might need, a welcome, a background, something that might be very common that you use every day, all the time, and you don't want to have a CG channel or a graphics channel tied to it. You can put these in M1 or M2, and they will appear. So, for instance, in this media manager, I can go in and select like different options. So I have all these different samples and things like that, right? So I can take this globe and I can just literally drag it over into M1. And you'll see that now in the M1 window, just above program, you see that, it's not a globe, it's a map. You'll see that map image in M1. I can take another graphic and drag it into M2 and take away my ISC logo. And now if you look, I have that special report graphic and it's going on program. So just to show you, as a key, it would key that graphic because it knows that it has a key channel to it, and I can key that graphic over top. So your media manager can help you drag and drop different images or different graphics into different media channels to be able to utilize those channels for different graphics that you need or for transitions or things like that. So that's Media Manager is very simple. You'll see M1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can drag different things or the same things into different channels. It does not matter. They will work across all of them. The only thing you have to keep in mind is if somebody's out there with their mic open, if you can mute, please, that would be helpful. Thank you. Dan or Ed, if you can mute that. So again, you can use all 4 media store channels. You can see those media store channels in your multi-viewer. I do not have all 4 of them on the multi-viewer that you'd be looking at. So right now we're not seeing them. However, I can certainly preview them by finding the source within on the production switcher. Okay, so I can find them and see what, where they are. So here's M1, here's M2, and then I've got M4 right here. I don't have M3 on my production switcher as of yet. So that's basically the Media Manager software or the Media Manager interface. On the left-hand side, you've got what's internal, stored inside of the Carbonite All Standard, which are just these graphics to use as samples. But then we have a little USB stick that we have in the front that allows us to put any graphic in there to be able to drag and drop into that section. Now, the most important thing, just so you know, from a graphics perspective, if you're using stills or anything, is if your production is built to be 1280 by 720, which is HD 720p, that's one format that we would use. Then all of your graphics have to be the right resolution. They have to be 1280 by 720. I don't want to dig into that too far in today's training or even tomorrow's, but the resolution, whatever your resolution of your program is or of your show, your graphics need to be built in that resolution. So most shows out there that we're doing are 1920 by 1080. That would be considered HD 1080. And all of your graphics would have to be built in that resolution in order to work properly. Otherwise, they'll be skewed. They'll either be too big or they'll be too small, and they won't key properly. So they just won't look right. So keep that in mind when you are dealing with that. Now, one of the things I did not go over yet is on a bus like this, we have 24 inputs and or 24 buttons, I should say. Well, this switcher is capable of 24 inputs. However, you could have a switcher that's capable of 16 inputs. You could have a switcher that's capable of 24 inputs, but your panel only has 16 buttons. So the cool thing about this, because we have labels and mnemonics and things, you can actually have a shift row. So the last button over here is a shift. So this button here, it says shift on the mnemonic, and it allows you to shift and see different sources. So if you look next to shift, ME1 is that source. If I hit shift, it changes it to black, or this one goes to M4 as opposed to M2. So you can have everything assigned on a shift bus as well. So let's say there's sources that we want on the front bus that we use all the time, and then there's a few sources that are coming into the production switcher that we don't use them all the time. So let's keep them on the back side on the shift. So for instance, we've got our Viz key video, which is like our graphics key. That's our, again, that black and white image that the production switcher uses to key the graphics. So that's actually an input. So we always put that on the back side. Then we have like the 2 tote feeds, so our 2 backup tote feeds that we might be getting from the tote company. We don't use them very often, only in the case of a graphic issue, which is certainly are few and far between at this point. So we'll put them on the back side. You can always get to them. So you hold shift in, it shows you, and then if I hit that button, it's going to put that on program. So shift, and you'll see now that that's selected on program, I don't have a source in there, a video signal. As you can see, it's coming up black on preview, but you can see that my shift button is lit and this button is lit. That's showing me that I'm on a shift. If I hit just this button, my shift goes away and that source becomes PVP1 in this instance, or my clip player, right? But if I hold shift and hit this button, now I'm on the shift side of it, okay? So I can select a shift and have another 23 inputs. So let's assume I can have 23 buttons here. I can have another 23 on the shift, and that gives me 46 different sources to choose from, which is more than enough for any of our facilities. Now, with that, there is a feature called Bus Map. Bus Map allows us to map whatever source we want to whatever buttons. So we may have our sources coming in, and they may be all the cameras first, and then all of our recorders second, and in a specific order. Well, that doesn't mean that they have to be on here in that order. Each button can be assigned to a different source through the settings, and I'll get to that in a minute. But you can have any sources assigned to any of these buttons. And that same thing goes for the shift. The shift key, you can have things assigned. Now you'll notice some of these are blank. When they're blank, that means nothing is assigned to them. The cool thing about that is when there's nothing assigned, I can't hit it by accident. I can hit that one because I have something there, but if I have nothing assigned, it won't change it. Okay, so it's something important to note. The other thing to note that's important is if you have a source selected in preview, okay, so I have a source selected here. If I hold the shift key in on the program bus, right? When I hold shift here, it's not going to allow me to change. Well, it does allow me to change. It changes preview. See how it's changing preview, but it's not changing it on the shift. I have to hold shift on the preview bus to be able to change previews, the shift on that, right? So in order to change to a source on a shift, you must be using the shift on that row. Okay, you can't hold shift here, but change down here. So in order to change this row, you'd have to hold the shift on its row. Okay, so that's important to note because that can get confusing, especially since you have a shift on this row as well for key sources, or for auxes, I mean, and keys for that matter. So you have a shift there as well. Okay. So again, you can use shift for multiple sources. We've kind of gone through all of these buses. To show you a simple bus map, we're going to go to up here. So if you go to menu, so I'm going to hit the menu button here, right? And it's going to show you this section over here. There's all these different buttons. So you can look at your status, which will show you in this little window, it shows you the status of the switcher, which software version you're running, what format. So we're in 1080i is our format, and things like that. Then if we go back to menu, we have other options like option, which is really just a way of giving you the serial number of the device and a few other features if necessary that they might want to add. There is system. System gives you some features to be able to configure the production switcher, like configuring what your clean feed is, which we'll talk about, or configuring the multi-view windows, which is that that display that we've been kind of looking at on top there, that preview program and the cameras. So system will allow you to configure that. If we go back over to reference, Reference is going to be a setup feature, but it's basically changing your video mode. That's how you assign whether you want it to be 1080i or 720p or any other different video mode that there may be in here. Everybody in our world is 1080i or 720p. Nobody's running anything different from that. The config button, config will give you some options here, and that's one of the options we're going to talk about here, right? So this allows you to change your inputs, your bus map, and GPIO along with some other things. So if we talk and look at input, if I push, it's going to select. So there's nothing above input, so turning the dial doesn't do anything. But if I push the dial, it brings me to the next section inside of input. Now what this does is this allows me to change the mnemonic display of input number 1. So it says cam 1. Now there's a much easier way to do this. So I'm not going to sit on this for a while, but this will allow you to change the mnemonics of camera 1. So if I were to click on it again, it allows me to change the position and then change the character of each input, and then I can just push the button to save it, and it would change that source. Now I can also change how big the font is. I can change the color. So one of the things I did not talk about was the colors down here on the mnemonics. You can see green, amber, orange, or yellow, I guess they call it. So you can actually assign all of your cameras to be green, all of your recorders to be orange, your graphics to be yellow, and then so you can segment out and easily look on the mnemonic display and say, okay, I know it's green, it's got to be my cameras because they're all lined up and they're all together like that in that color. So so you would change that up here. You can invert whether it's dark on light or light on dark. So lots of different features there for that. So we're going to go back to input. The other thing is the alpha. That's how you assign that key channel that we were talking about, that black and white image to a full graphic. So it knows how to cut things. So so those are in the mnemonics or in input. Now the next thing is bus map. Okay, so bus map, what it does is it says, okay, cross point button number 1. So cross point button 1 is this right here. Okay, so when I look at that, it says cross point button 1. Input number 1 is camera 1, and here's my shift. So on my shift, I can assign something too. So for instance, all you would do is just to rebus map it. I'd say, you know what, I want to have 3-play A, for instance. So all I'm doing is turning this dial to change which I want in there, right? And then on my shift, instead of it being none, I'm going to have black or something. So here's my media store channels, my clip player, here are some MEs, here's a background, I can put program, clean, I can put a lot of different things on there. I can put auxes on there. So there's a lot of different options, but I can choose, well, we'll just put background on there just for argument's sake. Okay, so now I've made a change to crosspoint button 1, I have 3-play A, and now I have, oopsie, background. So when I look back at this now, it's kind of hard to see, but you have 3-play A here instead of camera 1. And if I look at the shift, I now have BG here instead of camera 1. So that has changed completely. Now, what it does is it also changes what I see, right? So now when I hit this, I'm not seeing camera 1 anymore because that's been reassigned. So 3-play A is now assigned to that button. If I go to shift, background is assigned to that button. So it changes your assignments completely. So you do have to be careful about it, but you can reassign your entire layer by going through that bus map. Now, every time you leave, you'll notice my display has now changed because I started hitting buttons down here and doing some different things. So again, because we only have one screen up top, that screen changes based upon what you've selected down below. So I'm going to go back to menu. I'm going to go back to config. and then I'm going to go back into bus map. So I would recommend doing the bus map once and getting it right, and then not going back in there, not hitting a lot of other buttons. So I'm going to change crosspoint button 1 back to camera 1. I'm going to change the shift back to blank. And then you can just change by moving between, you can change which crosspoint button you're talking about on the switcher. And it will allow you to change the input and the shift. So you can see this one has nothing on the shift. This one has something on the shift, as does these two. Okay, so that's how you would configure a bus map to be able to define, I'll get my button straight eventually here, sorry guys, to change what these sources are on these different buttons, okay? So bus map's pretty cool. I think everybody would use bus map because you're gonna obviously not wanna have things organized the way they come into the production switcher, and you're certainly gonna wanna have additional features on it. So now that I changed my bus map back to camera 1, as you can see, now I've got camera 1 that I can choose on those program or preview. Going back up to the menus, just to talk about a few others. There are some, let's go to this one. So there's also in config, let's talk about config just one more time because this is important. In config, there's input and bus map. GPIO, we don't really use often. It's basically for triggers from external devices or sources that would make something happen in the production switcher. So it's very rare that we use that. I don't even know that I can think of any location where we do currently use that, but that is a possible option. Now, in this menu, there is a next, because you can see next is lit up, okay? So there's another page. So if I go to this other page, there's tally and on air, which we're just going to ignore for now. The important one is clock. So the reason I bring up clock is if you look at the production switcher multi-viewer, which I need to get rid of that, we have a clock in the middle of our screen, okay? It's showing 12:13:42, and that is an accurate time. So everybody can smile. You only got, a little over 15 minutes left before we take a nice little break. So that clock is really just getting its time from the production switcher. So when you first set up the production switcher, you set up the time and it drifts. I wish it was better. It's not. It's going to drift. So in order to change that, you would have to go into, again, like we talked about, you go to menu first, right? So you hit the menu button, you go to config, and then you go back over here to next, and it will take you to the clock. So again, you push on the knob. For all the interaction of this menu is the same. You push on the knob, it shows you the clock. So it shows you 12:14:32, the date is 4:27. So if we wanted to edit that, if we wanted to edit the date, we would push on this one. If we want to edit the time, we'd push on this one. So if you push on edit, it gives you hour, minutes, seconds. You can turn the clock. So if I want to change the minutes, I change it this way. If I want to change the seconds, and if I want to change the hours, I change it that way. Now, when you're done, you hit this first button here, and it's going to ask you, do you want to confirm changing the clock to that time? Well, obviously, I'm going to say no. But a little tip, if you look at your phone and have it to the second, I always set the time for 5 or 10 seconds past where I want, hit the button once to say confirm, wait till it actually hits that second. Then when it hits that second, I push this button again, and it sets the time. So good way to set your clock. And if you need to set your date as well, you'd go config, next, clock, edit the date. You'd edit it the same way. You change your month, day, year. So if I want to change, whatever, I can do that. And then again, push the button, confirm, and it takes. So important feature for the multi-viewer, because a lot of people do rely on that clock. It does drift probably I would get into a habit if you feel comfortable. It's not a bad habit to get into, check it at least once a day, or in the morning and set it. It'll be fine throughout the day, but I would say 2-3 days later, it's probably drifting, a second here, a couple seconds there. Every week it's going to drift, a little bit here and there. So it's not a terrible drift. You're certainly going to get through a day and be close to your proper time, and you may even get through a couple of days, but I'd certainly be leery every 3, 4, 5 days as to where the clock is. So some of the other menu features, just to kind of go over a little bit, in here is user and personality. So in these sections, there are different settings, but in user, so we selected user right here. In the user section is something called scheme and something called mnemonics. But if we get into the scheme, so the scheme is going to kind of do something interesting. So we talk about, let's do, so we talk about the production switcher and the lights and the color scheme, right? So there are different preloaded schemes. So I can choose from all these different schemes. So for instance, hot pink is a scheme. Would I suggest using it? No. Why? I'll load it and I'll show you why. It's very pink. It's bright pink. And it's even brighter when you get it on here. So there are different schemes that you can look at. There's a scheme called desert that you can load, and different color schemes. I highly recommend you stick with island, but you do have a lot of different options in there. So there's neon. Neon's bright as well. You've got bright greens and oranges, and I don't know how easy it is to see all of this on Zoom, but they can get pretty obnoxious at different times. This is like a light purple. Highly recommend island. That seems to be it's the default that the switcher now comes with. When the switcher first came out, it did not, but we always chose island. I highly recommend island. It just seems to give you a nice contrast between your buttons and things like that. So that is all in the user menu. So under users, you've got scheme. So mnemonics just allows you to change the contrast and the brightness of the mnemonic labels, right? So all these little mnemonics. So you don't get your choice of change this row or that row. It's kind of all or nothing, but it allows you to change the contrast and brightness of those mnemonics. Under personality, these are just some basic setup settings. I'm not going to necessarily go through most of them, but I'll just touch on a couple of them. There is a sleep feature, so if nobody touches a production switcher in 20 minutes, it will go to sleep. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean your show is going to go, go off air or go black or do anything like that. All that means is the panel itself is just going to go into a sleep mode, like a screensaver, and the buttons will all go dark, and it will just flash random buttons at any random in some random order, just to show you that it's alive, but it won't actually be lit up in full. So after 20 minutes, that's what that does. Now to wake it up, all you do is hit a single button and it will wake up the switcher. It will not switch the switcher. So if my switcher was asleep, I could hit my shift button down here and it would wake it up, or I could hit a camera 1 button down here and it would wake it up, but it wouldn't actually switch that button. It wouldn't actually make that switch. So you can feel comfortable that if it does go to sleep and you hit a button, you're not going to affect anything by doing such. So the next one is transition area, and I do want to show you this because it's kind of a cool little feature. In transition area, there's a couple of settings that are somewhat unique, and within that, when we're talking about transition area, we're talking about this section right here. Okay, so this is the transition section or the transition area, and one of the things we're talking about is in transition area is, do you want it to reset? Okay, so right now it's set up to not reset. And what that means is, if I were to hit key 1 as my transition to key 1, if I hit auto take, that stays at key 1, okay, even after it finishes the transition. Now, if I want to have it so that it resets, right, I can just change this to reset. All I did was just turn it. I don't have to push anything. I just turn it. It makes the setting change. Now, when I hit key 1, if I auto trans, it takes it and automatically defaults it back to background. So no matter what you have selected, if you have all 3 of these selected, when you transition, it automatically takes them off and puts it back to background, okay? So some people like to have it reset, some people don't. It depends, okay? And that's completely a user decision or a group decision if it's a number of you using the production switcher. But that's a setting that you can change to allow it to reset, okay? We don't use this rem key setting, so I'm not going to bother with it. And nor do we use these. The one we do use, which is, again, a few pages down, is this BGDDBL. What that stands for is background double, okay? And it's set up for transition clear. Now, what does that mean? That's a lot going on there, right? So what that means is if I have, let's say, if you look here, I have 3 keyers on my screen, right? They're all lit up. They're all on air. 1, 2, and 3 are all on air. And these are not, because this one's not lit up, okay? Well, let's say, for instance, I'm in trouble and I'm confused and I don't know how to do this, but I want to get all 3 of these keyers off the air as quick as possible, and just transition my preview in my program. Well, if that setting is set up, I can double hit this background button, and you see how it lit up everything that's on air. Okay, so if I only have 1 keyer on air and I double tap, it's going to light up background and key 1. And what that does is that allows us to let's get that off, and show you this. So when I have that, it's going to automatically take everything off the air and just give me a full video image on program, okay? So if I transition this, it takes everything off. So if I have these 2 keys on, so right here I have, let's do it this way. So I have my Laurel image, I've got my New York in a box, and I've got my ISC bug, right? Well, all of those are on screen and I'm in trouble. I need to get them all off the air because all I want to have is New York, okay? So if I hit this background doubled twice, all it gives me now, it gives me the ability to hit it twice and then quickly transition everything off screen, okay? I highly recommend that you have that setting on, okay? So again, it's in personality, transition area, background double. Now, there are a couple other settings. You can have it ignore, and I think those are the only 2, but I would highly recommend, if it's not on already, put it on, because it's a real easy way to just double tap that and it will get you everything cleared out. So all you have to do is double tap it and hit auto trans, and it's going to take any key off the air or anything else off the air and just give you program. Okay. So other menus, the only other thing we're going to touch on before we break is when we go to menu, there is a save feature and a load feature. I wouldn't recommend that most people try and use these. However, for site supervisors or even TDs that are always TDs, these things are kind of nice. So what these are is this will actually save the production switcher. So if we go and hit save, then it gives us this setting, right? So I can save. It's called a set. And basically what a set is it remembers the configuration of the switcher. It remembers how the multi-viewers are set up, how the windows are set. It remembers how your bus map was set up, so how we assigned each source to a button. It remembers all these details about all your custom controls, all your memories that we may store tomorrow, all these different things. So when you get the switcher all set up, you're going to want to save this. So you can save, set 0, and you can save everything. You can just save memories, which are those snapshots, or you can just save custom controls, which are those custom recorded sequences of things that we can build. So if you wanted to just save custom controls, you would just push custom controls, and it would allow you to save it. If you wanted to just save memories, you would just do that. If you wanted to save all, you would push all. Now, if you look, there's an asterisk next to it. So set 0 already has been recorded on. So if I do this, it's going to record over top of it. So if I change this, set 1 does not have anything recorded in set 1. And you have all the way to, from 0 all the way up to 9. Now, in most cases, when we build out a production system, we're going to save, if the system doesn't move, or the first track that it goes to is going to be in set 0. We typically also save a backup in set 9, just in case somebody were to overwrite set 0, then we have something to go back on. The nice thing is all of these sets are saved on the USB stick that's inside the production switcher, and we can actually get to that from a computer and actually pull those files off or reload them back in, so that we should be able to save everything and store it in case something were to happen catastrophically. So in order to save, all you would do is, so if I go to set 1, which is blank, and all I'm going to do is push for all, I'm going to store everything. It's going to say save all to set 1, confirm or cancel. I'm just going to hit confirm. It will save everything to set 1, and now, excuse me, and now that's loaded in, or that's saved. Okay. If I wanted to just save custom controls, I could just hit that one. It's saying save customs to set 1, confirm or cancel. I'll choose cancel. Now, the same thing goes if I hit menu again and I go back to the next button over here, which is load. Works the same way. So load gives you, I want to load a set. So I'm just going to do the same thing. If I want to load set 1, I would hit all. I'd say load all and confirm. Now, I could load just the memories. So I could get memories from another switcher, from another set somewhere else, and recall them, bring them in to my setup. So if you had different TDs on a different day, for instance, each TD could actually have their own set. And if somebody saves a mem, you could have memories that are shared or custom controls that are shared. For those sites that the system moves, for instance, we can have different sets for different racetracks. So when the set moves, or when the production switcher moves, the set changes along with it, and that's how we save all those settings and can get back to it. So that is the basics. That is a very quick overview, and I do understand that everybody's going to kind of, forget these things. I do understand that we probably have lots of questions. We'll dig into those questions this afternoon. We'll dig into this a lot deeper tomorrow, going through memories and custom controls, and depending on how many questions, we may dig in a little bit deeper this afternoon if there aren't too many questions, but we'll kind of play that out. So it is now 12:29. See, I finished a minute early for you. It's lunchtime. Go enjoy your lunch. We got an hour break. Come back at 1:30, and we'll do questions and answers and things like that. So appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. See everybody in an hour.
Thank you.
Hopefully everybody stayed awake for the early session. I know it can be kind of humdrum, and I tried to keep it as interesting as possible, but it is challenging to go through all this and keep it interesting all at the same time. So I really want to use this session here as a Q&A to go through different questions that you may have to kind of follow up on what we talked about. I'm certainly happy to dig a little bit deeper if we don't have any questions for follow-up, but I don't want to go too terribly far because it is a lot to take in, and especially for people that have never used it before, it can be even more challenging. So why don't we go through, does anybody have any questions? You can either do one or two things. You can use the chat feature, or you can raise your hand, and if you do, then Dan and Ed hopefully will see it. If I don't, and we'll take them one at a time.
Hey Joe, we already had a question during the first session. Jeffrey Hardy was asking how you undo something that you made a change in the switcher that you don't like. I mean, is there an undo button or is there a redo button?
Yeah, so good question. So there aren't any undo buttons. When you make a setting change, you just are going to have to go through and kind of turn that knob if it's a setting. And just turn the knob back or adjust the setting back. Obviously, there's no the whole point of the preview bus is to allow you to preview before you take something to program. So obviously you get quicker as time moves on, but the idea is to utilize that preview bus to preview something before you take it to air. And then if it's a setting kind of thing that's you don't really adjust settings too often on the fly during a show. So there's really no way to undo that except if you were to save your set prior to. So remember, the last thing we talked about at the end was actually saving a set that has all those settings stored. If you save that set and you know everything is good, then when you go back and start playing with things or making adjustments or changes, if you screwed something up or you weren't happy with it, you could always jump back to the prior saved set. But keep in mind that that's going to bring everything back, right? It's not going to, if you make 10 changes and you're not happy with one of those 10, you are going to have to go revert back, either fix that one or revert all the way back and get rid of all 10 as well, right, in that concept. So it'll revert you back to the last saved set.
Okay, yeah, that's what Rich Worley just said. Basically, you can reload a set if you are not happy with the set that you created.
Yep. Exactly. But again, it's not, you can't do the undo step by step. You have to do everything back to a full set. So
you can also make a copy of the command on another button. So if you make a mistake, you have the copy to bring back to that button.
Yeah. So if you do a custom control, absolutely, you could very easily make a copy of a custom control, store it to another custom control button, which we'll dig into tomorrow. But you could also make a copy of that custom control, put it somewhere else so you can bring it back at another point. So with that, we'll dig into more in more detail tomorrow, no doubt. So it looks like Kurt, I see a question from you, Kurt, on, well, let's see, I want to take that one first. Kurt, you asked about graphic resolutions. So the resolution of your production switcher, whether it be 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720, you're going to work in one of the two resolutions. It's not going to be something you switch back and forth with. So at your site, you would be 1920 by 1080. So everything you would build in terms of a graphic would be that resolution. It would be 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels high. The resolution would be 72 dpi is a pretty standard resolution, but it really doesn't matter. Even if it was 300, the production switcher would handle it. It just matters pixel width and pixel height. So you want to make sure that you create a graphic that is the same resolution as your working resolution of the production switcher. So hopefully that answered that question. Ed, Dan, I'm going to let you guys direct from here because I'm not sure I can see all the chats now. But some of them may have passed.
Godwin has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Tom. You're going to unmute yourself, Tom.
There we go. Technology. I'd like to download the manual just to have it with me, but it asks for a password. Can we get that on a separate email or something? Because I wouldn't mind having a paper copy because I work at, I move things around, so I have different switchers. I wouldn't mind having a manual for each switcher.
Yeah, so the manuals are somewhat different, but I can grab you some manuals and send them to you, or you can actually create a ROS video user if you wanted to on the support link. It is free to create a user for ROS, and it will allow you then to have a login and download manuals. I can distribute a link as well. There are videos online for all of this stuff. And I can kind of, when I distribute the YouTube link of this video, I can also send out some interesting links that might take you to some things if you wanted to dig a little bit deeper onto that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, John Levin has his hand raised, and we have other questions via chat. Want to go to John?
All right, let's go to John first. Yep, and then we'll come to the chat.
A quick question. So on the multi-viewer, there was a screen labeled clip viewer or clip player.
Clip player.
How does that compare to the M1, M2, M3, and 4, where you can bring in graphics or video?
Good question. So M1, 2, 3, and 4 are limited media store channels. They are for graphics and short, small transitions. The long and short of it is M1, 2, 3, and 4 it's like a RAM inside the production switcher. So it's like a memory bank. You have X amount of RAM to be able to bring things in and store it. There will come a time where if you load too many things into that media channel, it will fill up and then start dropping things out, kind of like first in, first out. So if you load up a graphic and it's a huge graphic and it takes up a lot of storage, and then you load in 3 more that are just as big and you run out, when you load that 5th one in, it's going to drop the first one. So the M channels the media store channels are really built for graphics. So still graphics or small Targa sequences. They don't do like video files and things like that. It'll only do JPEG, PNG, graphic files, or Targas and TIFFs. And the Targas and TIFFs, and actually PNGs too, you can do what's called a sequence. So what that is a series of frames, let's say 30 images that are all ganged together, and it treats it like a video segment. So media transitions inside the production switch are all those effects that we'll look at tomorrow, where the graphic takes over the screen as a media transition and the program cuts behind it. Those are Targa sequences generally that we run. So it's like a 30 frame or 45 frame. So it's 45 or 30 individual Targa files, and it will play them frame by frame in real time to play out that animation. So media stores are generally for just small sequences of Targas or TIFFs or PNGs, and then still graphics. The clip player, which I'd say only a few of you may have. The clip player is new to the newest production switcher, the Ultra, which is the one, if you remember, I talked about M1, 2, 3, and 4. The older production switchers gang M1 and 3 together, and then 2 and 4 together for cut and fill. The newer, the Ultra, has 4 independent cut and fill channels. It also adds what's called a clip player, and that is any clip that you put onto the USB stick, it will play that out natively if it's in the right resolution and format. It will play that as a clip. So that's new to most of the production switchers out there. It's only capable inside of the Ultra, and we don't use it very often because we have other ways and other pieces of equipment we generally use for that. But that is the difference. So I have an Ultra here. I am using the clip player as just an internal source to have another video playing.
So that's not related to like Viz 1 or Viz 2 to play video.
Correct. So that your Vizes are going to be your graphic systems that are just using graphics, or some do have the capability for clip playout within the actual graphics. But yeah, completely independent of your graphics playout. The clip player is an internal device inside this, just playing a video clip off of the USB stick. You can equate it, for many of you, you can equate it to either PVP or the Blackmagic Media Express software, something like that, where you would play just a simple clip, or even if it's a DVD player or anything. It's just like a little VTR that just allows you to play out, but it's built into the production switch. Okay, I'm long past on the chat. They've passed me, so you guys want to start asking questions off the chat?
Chris Verney had a question next. Is a custom control the same as a recall panel or a recall effect in the Ecolab world? But also, I think we should talk about like what a custom control is, what it recalls. Is there memories in there? Like a recall is kind of like a memory. I don't know if you just want to elaborate on that.
Yep, absolutely. So coming from the old Ecolab world, for production switchers, or in many other production switchers, some people will call it a panel. A memory in this is basically a panel. So it remembers things about the production switcher, as in what source is on program, what source is on preview. It remembers what source is on an aux maybe, or it can remember what source is in a key. It can remember the entire panel as it's set up right now. So it can remember if you have a DVE, like a squeezed video box, and you have it in this spot, a memory is going to remember that. So memory will kind of remember and take a snapshot of the production switcher. A custom control is different in that the custom control is a way of calling a memory or calling something else. So they interact very closely together, whereas you can call a memory by just hitting a number, right? Calling memory 99, you can just hit mem 99 recall, and it will bring up that snapshot of the switcher. You can set up a custom control that recalls the memory, that recalls mem 99, and also does 10 other things within that single button push. So the memory is a snapshot of the switcher. The custom control can make the switcher do any number of different commands and tasks within its playlist or within its sequence with one button push, instead of, like, you could build a memory that, or a custom control that literally does everything a memory does, but you'd have to do it step by step by step by step, whereas a memory just takes the snapshot once and you're done. Whereas a custom control, you probably wouldn't take a snapshot with a custom control, but you might have the custom control call the memory, the snapshot, to make it easier so that you have it written down physically with a name and a single button. Okay, that's my help. That's my mem 99. That's my recall 99. Recall that help, but it's named help now and it's on a button as opposed to remembering a number or something else. And then, like I said, the custom controls also dig in much deeper in that you can have it recall a memory, hold until you give it another button push. And then when you hit that button, it'll do the next task, which could be hit auto transform me, or, loads a graphic into a media channel, or, wipe something on screen. Or, a custom control literally is a recording of each button that you push. And we'll dig into that more tomorrow, most definitely. But you can hit record on a custom control and literally start pushing buttons. And every time you push a button, it's going to insert a command into that custom control as a recording. And then when you play it back, it's going to do them all right after another. So hopefully that helps. You're muted, but I'll take that as a yes. Okay, next.
Hey, Joe. Steve Martin had raised his hand earlier, but he's gone. Steve, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Dan.
Go ahead,
Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, Joe. Quick question. When you're doing keys, if it's like multiple keys, is there a priority, or are they layered a certain way? Like if you pull the DV box off and you want to have a graphic under, or?
Yep. Actually, that's a good question. So layering, the background is the bottom layer, and then key 1, 2, 3, and 4 are on top of that in that order. So this is your very top layer. Then this would be the next layer down, then below it, and then the very bottom. So if you had something in key 4, it would cover everything in key 3, 2, 1, end program. So that's the layering order, and I'm glad you brought that up because it was one thing I had forgotten to kind of explain.
Okay, gotcha. So that's like a downstream key on like the old switchers?
Yeah, exactly. So these are downstream keys, and this would be all the way downstream, right? This is your very topmost layer.
Right.
And then below, and below. And the one thing I didn't touch on, and I will bring up, there are things called clean feeds, right? So a clean feed is basically your video minus any graphics generally. Well, you can assign your clean feed to be no keys at all, or you can assign your clean feed to be in between any one of these. So I could say my clean feed should include all my keys except for this key right here, this key 4, because that's where all my graphics are coming from. So there's some flexibility there in terms of that, but and we can talk more about clean feeds as we move on today, but basically the layering order is exactly that: top, below it, and then the very bottom.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Joe. Dan Duncan's got questions about building graphics and graphics resolutions. and sizing. Dan, you want to go ahead and ask that question? I'm a little confused.
Dan, did you hear that? Duncan, do you have a question on
You already
graphics
answered
resolution?
it with the previous question. It goes by the size of the SEG, and then, you know, you
Okay.
just have to know what size you have to build it, though. How do you know that? How do you know?
Correct.
You said one switcher was different than the other.
Correct. So it's just a matter of what resolution you're operating in at that specific racetrack. So, for
And that's
instance,
found in that little button you showed me down on the menu thing, right?
correct. If you go to menu and you go to it's the reference button or the status button. The status button will show you. So if you look back at, so if you go to menu, status, that will show you your software version and your current switcher configuration. So that's 1080i. Now again, it's only going to show you 1080i or 720p. There are two very standard resolution sizes for that. So we would distribute that to you guys at the track so that you have it. But effectively, a 1080i switcher like this, set up as 1080i, is 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels high. So that's how many dots are on the screen that make up that image. So this is a 1080i setup. If it was 720p, you can also go to the reference section. So if you click on menu reference, it will show you the video mode, and you can actually change that to different resolutions. So here's a 720p resolution, which would be 1280 pixels wide by 720 pixels high. You may ask, why do we use 1080i versus 720p? There's two differences. The most important differences are that 1080i has more pixels, so there are more dots. The more dots that it uses to make up the image, the better technically the resolution is of the image. But it's 1080i, so it's called interlaced. So it means that basically you have 30 frames in a second. So a 1080i image has got better resolution, but is interlaced, so it only has 30 frames. 720p, which is progressive, the pixels are less, so you have less dots, but you have progressive imaging, so you have 60 frames a second, or just short of 60 frames per second. So some people will choose 720p because high resolution or high speed sporting events like horse racing at times, or NASCAR, or things that have very, very high speed motion. Some people feel that the 720p can be a better resolution for slow motion and things like that, where you're the hooves of and the legs of the horses, as they're moving real fast, they'd be a little bit cleaner in progressive as opposed to interlaced, because now you have double the frames, so you have double frames for each video signal. So it's kind of a trade-off. You trade off more frames, and so a little bit better slow motion or smooth slow motion versus pixels or resolution on the entire image. So there are people that go both ways. Fox Sports will broadcast in 720p. NBC Sports will broadcast in 1080i. It depends.
As you well know, I've come to you many times because Rosecroft dropped something on me, and then I go play, it don't work, and I had,
right.
Now I'm stuck.
Correct.
I need to be able to give them the proper information when they build something, or.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that should be something that should be distributed. We do have a basic form, and I can certainly send, if anybody does need, please let me know. But we can distribute I have a basic form template that allows us to distribute resolutions for graphics, video files, things like that, and just some generic specs for everybody in case the racetracks are marketing or providing graphics or videos and things like that for playback. So.
Hey, you.
Okay, next up.
Jason Clark has a question. He wants to know if you can show everyone how to set up a key for the split. Is that too involved for right now? Will that be tomorrow? And
So,
one ME or two ME also.
Yeah, so we can look at a quick split screen, but we're not going to dig into the, there's two ways to do a split screen. Okay, we're going to look at the quick, simple way to do it, and we're going to look at a more complicated, but what we feel is a better way to do it tomorrow, because it's much more complicated and complex. So looking at a generic split screen, let's see if we can get some things here set up for you. Okay, so so basically for a regular split screen without using keys, the easiest way to do it is obviously if you click on the wipe button here, okay, and then you can then come back and just select the two sources that you're mixing between, and you can just simply take your T-bar and first select the right wipe. So we're going to hit wipe, and then we're going to look at the top section here, and we're going to choose the horizontal wipe, and then we're going to come back here and do our T-bar. So that is a very simplistic way to do a split screen. Now, I can give you one advantage to doing it this way is that you have complete adjustment over where the split screen is. So if your camera person on top is shooting a little bit wider and you want to shrink that space a little bit, or is having trouble, vertically positioning, you can certainly adjust. So it gives you a little flexibility there. However, it looks somewhat sloppy when you're trying to generically figure out, okay, this is where I want to adjust it to. You want to make sure it comes in even, smooth, and so this is kind of just a very simple rudimentary way to do it. The harder way to do it, which I don't want to dig into fully until tomorrow, is to use keys, and you create a DVE box. So we have this DVE box here, and we can move that DVE box around, right? So if you take a DVE box, you can take the size of that DVE box and make it full, but still move it. So you see how I can move that image. So if we had a live race going, I could actually move with Y position of that key. So just to show you what I'm doing is not that one, is this. I'm up here adjusting the Y position, right? As I adjust, you're seeing that video. So I can take one key with a as a DVE and position it up top here, and then I can take a second one and I would do the same thing, except instead of going vertically with it, I would go lower with it. And then what we'll dig into tomorrow more closely is we would crop that out. So I would crop out the top portion of it in next, basically. If you were to look, I'll get my keys right one of these days, but so X, Y, and size, right, for the DV. Well, I can also go in here and I can crop the vertically or horizontally. So if I start cropping vertically, then what you'll see is, see how it's not moving the video, it's just cropping the top out. It's actually cropping from the bottom too, if you look. So we'll get a lot more detailed into this tomorrow, but you basically would crop out the image. Okay, so I've done my crop, and then now I can go back to my Y position, and I can adjust my Y. So now I've got kind of this DVE box that is a section of my video that I can move around. So I create two sections, one on the low side and one on the high side. And once I create that, I save it as a memory recall or a memory panel. And that'll allow me to actively be able to set up the split screen that way with two DVEs. So basically, you take an image, you crop it, and then you take it and shove it up top. You take another DVE, crop it, shove it down below. Makes your split screen. And then when you recall the split screen, the Carbonite has something in it called effects dissolve, which we'll look at tomorrow as well. And that makes it so that if you say, put a box in this location and then save another box in this location, when I go between them, instead of it just popping from one to the other, it actually moves from one to the other. It adjusts size, position, etc. It automatically does it. It's built in. It interpolates the position and the images. Really common with DVE boxes that we use a ton. So once you do that, when you create that split screen with the memories, you create one with the two keys, with the two cropped video signals, and one with the one you want on top in full screen is your second save. And when you go between them, it makes it look and appear like it should, and it makes it so that it affects between them instead of it just being like a pull down wipe of the T-bar. So I do want to wait. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does it save the inputs or just the boxes?
So, and we'll dig into it tomorrow. You can have it do either one. So inside the software, that dashboard software that I showed you. So let's see, it's this input right here. So inside of here, you can actually choose when you save a memory. There are all these options within the software. So if I go in here and say, okay, I want to save just these three things right here, I can really dig down and say only remember certain aspects of a key. So I can say only save the key 2 and only save the bus, which is basically the source that is selected in key 2. Or I can say don't save that and unselect it. I can say save the type, which is a DVE, and the mask, which is the size, the cropping, and the XY positioning. I can even say save whether it's active or not active. So if it's on air or off air, right? So that when you recall that, it knows whatever it saved and brings on just whatever is saved in that memory. So you can really get in there and restrict kind of these features and things so it only affects what you need. So by doing that, you make this custom control, or actually make this memory panel that is saved that only affects and does what you want it to do, and only those few things. So it's not affecting the whole switcher. It's not affecting any other piece. It's just going to create your split screen and bring it on and off. So we'll have, usually on a split screen, we'll have a split screen setup button. So that basically brings your split screen on, sets it all up for you, puts it into like preview, let's say. And then you have an in and an out, because if you're, especially thoroughbreds or even harness 2, you're going around a couple of times. So you're bringing your split screen in and out throughout the race. So we'll have an in and an out, so you can just toggle between them. So all it does is just move them in and out of the split, and then an off that actually takes your split screen off and shuts off the keys to kind of just help the show. So we'll create some custom controls tomorrow that go through that process and really help be able to get you in and out of a split screen much easier, and allows you to keep it consistent. So the split's consistent. It allows your camera operators, so instead of your camera operators having to focus on shooting top or bottom, right? So if you do a wipe, that camera operator has to then, and I'm sure all of you know, your camera operator has to then, instead of shooting middle of the screen, they have to shoot up and keep their horses on the top portion of the screen. When you do this in a DVE, you don't actually have to shoot top or bottom. Everybody shoots middle of the screen. So your recordings are all horses going across the middle of the screen. But we're actually going to take that middle of the screen that you're shooting and just move it up to the top or move it down to the bottom to make it look like it's a split, even though you're shooting normally full screen with them down the center. So I hope that made sense, Jason. I hope that answered your question. Like I said, I don't want to dig too far into that unless we have some additional time after the questions, or till tomorrow, because I think tomorrow it'll be a big thing with custom controls and recalls.
All right,
Memory
good deal.
recalls.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, Joe. Actually, Rich Worley actually said something interesting about the split screens with the transition. You can also set a transition limit, correct? So your transition can only go so far. Is that
so
correct?
you can create a memory panel that that saves the transition bar location, so that it recalls the location of that split. I have yet to successfully make the transition rate or the transition location set point change. I don't know if you have, Rich, and if you have, great. I don't usually play around with that too much. We'll either create a memory recall that remembers that point in the wipe, or we'll use the DVE.
No, I use a DVE split, but
Right.
when you set up a wipe, one of the functions in the memory is that you can set the percentage,
Yep.
50%, 40%, how far it will go.
Yeah.
So no matter how many times you hit the transition button or the fader bar, it'll only go that far.
Yeah, so the challenge to that is if you ever want to use a wipe for something else, you can't. You'd have to reset that back and forth through like a custom control or something of that nature.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's one of the reasons why we generally don't try to use the wipe feature to do that. But you can, however, like I said, you can set your wipe up halfway, and you can save that as a memory panel, as a recall. So, memory 01 or whatever it is, and it should bring your T-bar to that exact spot when you do that. So just as a thought, that is a possibility for that. Okay. Next question.
Question from Nelson about making transitions, but also want to say then it'll be Carlos and Eric after Nelson. Nelson, you just want to ask the question?
Hey, Nelson, you there? We may have lost Nelson.
Okay, we'll skip this question. It's more for tomorrow anyway. It's about making and loading transitions and animations, which is more.
Yep. Go ahead, Nelson. What's the question? Just how to make them? You're muted, Nelson.
Yeah, I know.
There we go. Dogs.
Anyway, I was just asking about if you were going to show us how to put those interstitials in and make those interstitials.
Yes. So I'm not going to show you how to make the interstitials, only because that would be a conversation for another day. None of them are created inside of the production switcher. They're created either inside of a Viz or Expression or After Effects or some sort of other animating program. But I'll certainly show you how to load a transition into the production switcher, and really it's very similar to what you would do to load a graphic through the media manager, which we kind of glossed over a little bit. So it's going to be very similar to, I don't have one loaded in here today and I will for tomorrow, but we'd have in the transitions folder a transition, and it would look like a still. It would look like one Pycon there, one image that you would literally just drag into the media channel. Once it's in the media channel, the production switcher or the media manager will show, see how it says 1FR, which is one frame, right? So a graphic is just a single frame, but a transition is multiple frames. So it will show as multiple frames inside, and then you'll have a play icon there. The nice thing about the production switcher is once you do have that, it will allow you to choose, better off using this media button down here to actually play it. So theoretically, if you were to drag the image from here, from the top section over here where the queue is, if you were to drag that into the media channel, it knows, the production switcher already knows, like it's assigned M1 as its transition channel. So once you do that, then when you bring up, the media button and you hit auto transition, it would actually play that out automatically. So it knows all of that. There are a couple of details that you need to work out in terms of how to handle the custom controls to actually call it, because you can actually it's much easier to make a custom control that calls the transition and makes it all happen, as opposed to going step by step, which would be loading the transition into a media channel, then coming over to your switcher and hitting the media button, and then hitting auto transition. And so there's like 4 steps involved. we'll go through and make a custom control tomorrow that actually makes all 4 of those steps one single button push every single time. It makes it much easier to actually load a transition, recall the play the transition out, and then it will be one button push that does everything for you. So we'll definitely get into that tomorrow. Tomorrow is mainly going to be transitions, media, memory recalls, and custom controls. That's going to be like 3 of the primary pieces we go over tomorrow, because those are the things that everybody uses and will utilize often.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Joe, Carlos is up next. Go ahead, Carlos.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you are.
Hey, so I was wondering, what are some situations you would have to record your actions? It's probably a question for tomorrow, but I probably won't make it tomorrow.
Okay, well, you can always look at the video tomorrow as we go through. So, so reasons you would want to record, like use a custom control, would be to, just like I talked about with transitions. So in order to do an animated transition, you have to load the media into the media channel. You have to change the dissolve basically you would have to change this over here from dissolve to media, and then you would have to hit auto transition, and then you'd want to actually have to go back to dissolve so that every time you hit auto transition, it didn't keep going to a media store. So so one of the things you would do would be to save all of those steps as one button that recalls, loads the animation into the media store channel, and then does all of those things with a custom control. So that would be, you would record you loading. So your first recording would be, you hit record, it starts recording. You would load the transition into the media channel. You would hit the media button in the bottom there in the transition area. You'd hit auto transition, and then you'd hit dissolve again, and it records those 4 steps. Now, there's a couple other little things you have to do, but for the most part, that's how you would make a custom control to recall that transition. And think of it this way: if you have, let's say, 4 different transitions you want to use, by using the custom control is loading the transition you want. So you can have 4 custom controls, and each custom control is the same thing. The only difference would be step 1, which is which media it loads into the memory channel. So that way you have 4 different transitions, you have 4 different custom controls. Each custom control would load that specific animated transition into the right media channel. The other reason you would record steps would be, you could record capturing photo finish, or some people might use like a dead heat highlight or something like that. And so you might want to record some of those steps. And there are also some facilities where we have like a custom control that has a hold in it that literally takes you step by step from the start of the race to the end of the race, kind of thing. So you could use a custom control and record those steps, and then just add a couple holds in there, and you'd have this one long sequence of events that you could go through to get through an entire sequence of a race almost. So hopefully that answers your question. Hey, Chris, did you have a question? I see you're muted, but I saw your movement. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Carlos, you good?
Is that it?
Yeah, that was interesting. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Okay, next.
Nobody. We're done. Can we go now?
Nelson. Nelson, you get to hang around till 3:30 now. No, I'm kidding. Who's next, Ed or Dan? Eddie, you're muted. Ed, you are muted, Ed. Thank you.
I'm back. My space bar is not working. I don't know why. Eric's got a question about 1080p. Eric, are you on here if you just want to ask a question about going to 1080p? Because he's asking, can we do 1080p in production switcher?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, so you were saying earlier about the difference between doing 720 and 1080.
Mm-hmm.
But is it possible to do 1080p against 1080i?
So yes and no. So it's not just the production switcher that has to do 1080p. So there is obviously there is more resolutions, right? There's 1080p, there's 4K, There are lots of different options. Yes, I'm pretty confident that all of the Ross Carbonite line production switchers can go up to 1080p. However, when you do 1080p, all of your sources have to match as well. So every input coming into the production switcher has to be 1080p if your production switcher is set to 1080p. So that complicates things with cameras that are used, because not all of our cameras are 1080p, and pretty much the entire system down the line. So a system is designed based upon those facts at the beginning. So when we come in and build that system up, design everything, install it, we are knowing ahead of time we're going to be either 720p or we're going to be 1080i. If a 1080p system is usually backwards compatible to 1080i or 720p. It does not, however, work the other way just because of the bandwidth in the video. So long and short of it is, Carbonite production switchers can do 1080p natively out of the box. It's everything else inside the production system as to whether it's capable of 1080p, and then whether the system is capable and whether we bring that up to that or not. It just adds another level of cost and everything to the image. However, it would certainly be a better option, or a better quality, as would 4K would be even better. But again, costs are prohibitive.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you. I really don't expect anyone to really go full 4K anytime soon.
No, 4K will be a while. I think you might see some 1080p stuff coming out soon, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Joe, I don't have any more questions. I don't know if you want to. There's no more questions on the board right now.
Okay, well, that's actually that's a good thing. That either means I did my job or nobody's paying attention anymore. But either way, we'll take it. I'll take it and stay on the optimistic side and stay. Everybody has paid attention and captured everything I took in. So if that's the case, I'm gonna let you guys go for the day. That way I can kind of reset myself a little bit and kind of get ready for tomorrow. So we can dig in a little bit deeper into, like I said, custom controls, memory recall panels. We'll get into bringing in some graphics and animated transitions to go through some of that, and we'll certainly create a split screen and go through some of that. So tomorrow will be a lot more in depth, somewhat more advanced, and we'll focus on some really critical and important things that you guys are all using out in the field. In a real world situation, DVE boxes, things like that. So, and if anybody has any other questions or wants to sit and chat for a little bit, feel free. But otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow at 10:30.